Dr. Shiva, you are a system biologist and you have multiple engineering degrees from MIT, and your focus is on biological engineering, a field that did not even exist 20 years ago. So what is it that you can add to the corona discussion that we haven't heard from virologists or epidemiologists?
Yeah, so I think if you look at the field of systems biology, Jasmine, the reason the field of systems biology was created was the entire scientific community, particularly those people who really wanted to look at large-scale systems problems, which is what the body is. We're recognizing for far too long it was being owned by virologists, biologists, microbiologists. So if you think about this in a systems manner, if you think about a big airplane, engineers understand this, right? If you think about an airplane, imagine someone just knowing how the little bolt worked on the propeller. Or imagine someone just knowing the seat in the pilot's seat, okay? Or how the steering wheel worked. These are parts of a much larger system. Biology has really been what we call reductionist, which means you win a Nobel Prize if you just understand how two parts work together, two proteins, okay? The history of the discovery of DNA all the way up to 2003 was all based on what was called the central dogma theory of biology, which was you find a gene and this gene will lead to disease. That was it. It was a very reductionist model, and people were incented for finding genes which created a particular disease. But in 2003, something quite remarkable occurred, which was we found out that we have the same number of genes as a worm. So human beings have about 20,000 genes, and a worm has 20,000 genes. And this literally flipped biology on its head. And it flipped biology on its head is because people realized, wait a minute, if the number of genes, because biologists in their mistaken, remember, they're not systems guys, thought that complexity of an organism was a function of the number of genes, okay? More genes, more complex. Well, engineers, we know that's not true. If I give you 100 parts, you could put them in a linear line, connect them one after the other. Someone else could connect them up very differently. It's the connections, it's the interconnections that determine complexity. So then people said, wow, it's not about the genes and the proteins, it's how they're interconnected. And this led to the recognition we needed to go beyond genes to understand molecular mechanisms. And that's when MIT created the Department of Biological Engineering in 2003, because there was a recognition we needed to take an engineer's approach to biology, and that there was a huge gap in knowledge, and that would never be fulfilled if we just listened to what the virologist like an Anthony Fauci had to say, or a biologist, because they don't think about the ankle bone being connected to the foot bone. They're not paid for that. They're not incentivized for that. So that's when the field of systems biology came. I came back to MIT. I'd already done 3 degrees there, started various companies, deep interested in computing and biology. I came back, and my goal was to create a technology which people thought was impossible to create. Imagine having a technology using the computer that could literally model complex interactions, mechanisms. So we could, for example, model cancer on the computer, or we could model inflammation or the immune system, or understand architecturally. That's a systems approach. That requires a very different breed of a scientist, and that's what I am. That's a systems scientist.
So how does that translate to this corona crisis? So how are you looking at this in a systematic way?
Right, so from a systems perspective. So if you go look at, first of all, let's go back what system we're talking about. We're talking about something called the immune system, okay? Now, what is the immune system? So the immune system is like the operating system of your body. It goes back billions of years all the way to invertebrates, if you believe in evolution, or even if you believe in natural design. It's the foundational system of your body. Well, what is that system? I've used the word system multiple times now. Well, in 1962, we had an understanding of the immune system, just 2 boxes. And that was the basis of developing vaccines. It was you had the innate system and the adaptive. And the theory was when a pathogen, virus, fungi, bacteria come to you, first your innate system wakes up and it tries to take it out like military soldiers trying to fire at it. And if that doesn't work, then it goes over to your adaptive system, which is like sharpshooters, which creates antibodies. Based on that understanding of the immune system, we based it on that was a base of developing vaccines. And in the United States, John Kennedy passed the National Vaccine Act in 1962. However, by 1986, Jasmine, a lot of people were getting hurt, injured, and parents are starting to sue vaccine manufacturers. And then the United States created what was called the National Vaccine Injury Court. We'll come back to the reason I'm saying this is The understanding of the immune system we have today is so different. It's not just two boxes. It's that there's a missing link called the interferon system, which I spent my PhD work, understanding and modeling. The microbiome, which is all those amazing gut bacteria, viruses and bacteria, the interconnection to the brain, the neural system. So it's a much more complex system.
So how does this translate to this novel coronavirus, everything that you were just talking about?
Well, it's not so novel, okay? You have to understand the history of those in power in medical establishment has always been to blame something on a virus. Find a virus, blame it on it, okay? It's like some accident takes place, we got to find someone to blame that accident on. Well, the reality is that this novel, first of all, coronavirus has been around, they're everywhere. You probably have pieces of it, I do, all different variations.
This is true though, but this variation is new.
Well, this variation is new, so are many other variations. We have 380 trillion viruses in our body right now. You're a walking germ factory. I'm a walking germ factory. If you ask someone, when a virus comes to you, how do you get sick, right? They would think the virus, this is, by the way, what the mainstream media promotes, or in fact, what the medical establishment, in fact, MDs, unfortunately, because of their big pharma education, they don't know the immune system. So they would say, oh, the virus comes to you, the virus eats away at your lung epithelial, vaccine comes and blocks it, okay? So that's their understanding. It's a very unfortunate, fake science, outdated model. The truth is that the reason that it's important to understand this, whether this virus or any virus, is what actually happens is that if your immune system is weakened and dysfunctional, it happens as you age, it happens with people with pre-existing conditions. What happens is your own immune system overreacts. It's not like you're running on 6 cylinders, you're running on one cylinder. And that one cylinder tries to make up for everything from an engineering standpoint. And it overreacts and it attacks not only the virus particles, but it also attacks the tissues and the cells where that virus particle happens to hang out. In the case of the coronavirus, this kind, like SARS, it goes to the lung epithelial. Okay? Other different viruses go to different points, like the polio virus ends up going to your myelin sheets in your spine. So when you have an overreaction, you're going and attacking that and people get paralysis. But the key point that we need to understand if we want to really talk about science is that it's your dysfunctional, weakened immune system attacking itself.
But this is what experts, even the, let's say, designated experts are saying, that people who have dysfunctional immune systems, certain medical preconditions, are more likely, much more likely, especially when they age, to be more sick or to be severely sick, which is what we're seeing in the United States. There's a lot of people who have diabetes, cardiovascular disease. So naturally, they would be more ill due to this coronavirus. So nobody is actually saying anything against the point that you were just making.
Well, here's the point. If you read a news article, that's embedded way down in it. They don't explain that. Because without the detailed understanding of that and exposition of that, what is the solution now? So let's assume now they're saying it. What is the solution? Well, what is their solution? So if you take a population of 1,000 people, and let's say 10 of those people are immunocompromised, smokers, diabetics, elder, like in Italy, 38% of the population is over the age of 65. So how are you going to handle this systems problem? You have a population, epidemiologically, which is prone, frankly, to dying from all sorts of things, okay, because of their immunocompromised issue. Now you have an external pathogen coming in, and do you blame that as the basis for shutting down an entire economy of 1,000 people? Or do you take a much more personalized medicine approach? You see, one of the things that occurred in 2003 is we realized that we needed to move beyond one size fits all. That's medieval medicine. Everyone gets the same. You have diabetes, everyone gets the same drug. You have this, everyone gets the same drug. The goal was to recognize your body type, my body type are different. It's a right medicine for the right person at the right time. That's one of the emergent things that came from the Human Genome Project. I hope that's clear. So if you want to practice true medicine, even from the conventional Western system standpoint, why are you shutting down a whole economy? Why are you imposing for everyone, healthy people, people who are very critically ill, people who are in that immunocompromised people, the exact same medicine and destroying an economy, that too, in a fundamental way, is an overreaction. So we have the overreaction of the immune system in these immunocompromised people, and then you have politicians overreacting and shutting down economies.
However, you have recognized that this, I will call it a novel coronavirus, is highly infectious. You're heavily criticizing the shutdown, which is happening pretty much all over the world. So is there perhaps a scenario where you would recognize that a shutdown of this sort would be maybe necessary?
Well, look, so you're asking a good question. So let me ask you a question to answer that. When H1N1 took place, 56 million, 17% of the United States population was infected. Did we shut down the US economy?
No.
Okay.
So this is also a novel approach.
How many people died? 60,000 people. Okay. Did we shut down the US economy?
No, of course not. No.
Okay. So the question eventually comes for any common sense person rationally to say, why are we shutting down the entire economy?
They are arguing that it is more infectious than perhaps the H1N1 virus.
Okay, so let's go through that, right? How many different viruses do we know with an infection rate like this? And if you look at H1N1, or for that matter, the number of deaths that took place, even in the worst case, that was about 15% of the US population got infected. Let us take, for the sake of argument, 2 times that many people get infected, which would be 30%. So in the United States, 90 million people. And that was 0.3% of the population of the United States died from it, if you work out the numbers. Let's double that. In this case, 0.6%. So I'm doubling the infectivity rate, doubling the death rate to 0.6. That would mean 540,000 people die. Well, how many people die in the United States of heart disease?
I'm not sure. I think the daily rate that I checked today, 2017, was it's between 7,700 to 8,300 people that die altogether daily in the United States.
That's daily. But heart disease, 540,000 people died. 600,000, okay?
But is heart disease infectious? You know, you could come back to that argument.
Yeah, but here's the thing. Let's talk about, I'm following through just the numbers without this fear-mongering. If you applied even quote-unquote infectious fear-mongering, 540,000 people die. And that's a lot of people, maximal. Well, 600,000 people already die of heart disease today. 500,000 people die of cancer. 440,000 people die of medical errors. And another 200,000 people die of pharmaceutical drugs, and 1.9 million people get hospitalized. Where is a shutdown? If we really care about public health, which we all do, then let's talk about obesity. 30% of the United States population is obese. Where is a shutdown? I think maybe there should be a shutdown for that. Where is a shutdown for all these other ailments that are taking place at a fundamental level? 54% of the American youth have some type of autoimmune disorder. 54%. 1 out of 5 kids has a mental issue going on. Where is a shutdown? And what we're talking about is a biased approach to medicine, because it does not serve the interests of Big Pharma, because the people I'm talking about, the examples, serve Big Pharma. And it's not about addressing the real issues. And this is what people need to wake up to. Yes, we care about people. Where is a shutdown for all the heart disease, the medical errors, the obesity, etc.? You know why? Because those things are caused by big agriculture and Big Pharma. And that truth does not want to be addressed by the mainstream media, because they are paid by Big Pharma and Big Ag. Go look at their ad revenue. So if we want to get down to truth and we want to talk about science, let's really talk about science. Let's not talk about numbers in this broad swath context. Let's compare them relatively, because this is about public health. So you
described this crisis as one of the, and I quote, biggest fear-mongering hoaxes ever. Would you care to explain how the entire world is presumably just falling for this hoax?
Well, not the entire world. If you talk to people, a lot of people are upset. The American working people are getting more and more upset.
Well, let's talk about the politicians, right? And the decision makers who are presumably falling for it.
Look, what's occurred because of the unfortunate aggregation, amalgamation of media, the unfortunate amalgamation and centralization of power of big hospitals and Big Pharma, you have a finite set of people who can control narratives. And this isn't even conspiracy theory. This has been well written about by Robert McChesney. Noam Chomsky has written about it, manufacturing consent. You can go do PhD theses on this. And what we're witnessing right now, someone like me who has the credentials, I was able to get incredible credentials, is actually able to speak out about it. I have all their credentials from MIT. I won a Fulbright scholarship. I was nominated for the National Medal of Technology and Innovation for the U.S. Medal. So I'm not some kook, all right? What I do know is that the scientists in academia, unfortunately, they too have become part of big academia, because since the passage of the Mansfield Amendment in 1970, we got rid of great scientists. It's academics. So academics shut their mouth, and many of them, my friends at MIT, they say, Shiva, what you're saying is absolutely right, but I'm not going to say that because I have a family to feed. And that's what's happened. So I was fortunate because I was an inventor, also made my own money. I run my own research center, so I don't owe anything to anyone, Jasmine. But the fundamental issue here is the noble duty of science was to tell the truth. So I'm telling the truth when I say this will go down in history as one of the biggest fear-mongering hoax, because it serves three purposes. To destroy economies. We're seeing the massive destruction of the US economy. 17 million people are out of work. Two, we're seeing the unequivocal planning of Big Pharma, the WHO and CDC to mandate medicine. In 6 months from now, you won't be able to get your driver's license card. That's what they want. Where's your vaccine card? You won't be able to go to a gym. You won't be able to go to a discotheque, etc. Think about that. And why? It's because Big Pharma is losing money. Year over year over year, go look at the data. 30% they spend more and more and more in R&D. And you would think if you spend more R&D, you should be getting more allowances. Well, they're getting 30% less and less allowances. Why? Because even the FDA is recognizing that their products are toxic. So their new business model is vaccines. Why? Because pharmaceutical drugs, you can sue the vaccine manufacturer. You can take them to court. They spend $5 billion, 13, 14 years. Very expensive, high risk, low reward. You can get sued. Vaccines, no risk. You know why? Because they don't go through the same regulatory framework. They call them biologics. All right? Number two, you can't sue vaccine manufacturers. Thank you, Ed Kennedy, and the politicians who protected Big Pharma. So you can't sue them. And if you can, you have to go to a vaccine court run by the US government, which means taxpayers pay for it. You see what I'm saying? This is not being mentioned in any news in the mainstream media, what I'm talking about.
So what I take is, and what I understood from the statements that I've read of you and watched your interviews, is that your biggest concern is mandated medicine. So just this weekend, Bill Gates was on one of our German public television channels, and he was talking about vaccinating 7 billion people. So what is that about?
There you go. As I predicted, the goal is they will crash the entire U.S. economy, even if it's printing money for $6 trillion, to get 7.2 billion. And this is the part of the Sustainable Development Goals. Imagine 7.2 billion people, giving them $1,000 a year, $7.2 trillion. Bill Gates knows no biology, did not invent DOS, comes from a wealthy family, and he has been anointed as though he knows what he's doing, because what he did was he stole money from the public coffers. His foundation should have been paying taxes. They move it to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, do some great PR as though he's going to be the savior of all the dark people on the planet. It's racist. It's institutionalized racism, what he's doing. And fundamentally, his goal is mandated medicine. Look at his partners. Hillary Clinton, Chan Zuckerberg, the CDC, the WHO, Big Pharma. These are his buddies. These are the circles he hangs around with. So we need to look at these people want to do top-down medicine. Why? Well, simple is follow the money. Follow the money. $7 trillion per year recurring revenue to a pharmaceutical industry that's going down the tubes.
But how does that work? Shutting down the entire economy, not just in the United States, but in other countries as well. And on the other side, you have Big Pharma that may benefit from this situation in the future.
Not may, they will. Okay.
Yes, but how does that offset one the other? Letting an entire economy break down in multiple countries, not just the United States, and then having a few pharmaceutical companies take the win, that doesn't seem like it's worth it.
Well, have you done the numbers?
No.
Do the math. Okay, you should do the math and you'll find out how worth it is for them. You have $1 trillion industry called Big Pharma, and this is a central point, is burning down, okay? Their pharmaceutical drugs, people aren't buying them. Look at Sanofi's stock. for cardiology drugs and diabetes drugs, tanking. Okay. Do you eat organic food? Do you try to eat healthy?
Well,
the
food in Germany is better quality than it is in America.
Do you yourself try to live a good lifestyle?
Of
Do you
course,
try to
yes. Yeah.
Okay. Now that wasn't true 20 years ago. 30 million people in the United States now do yoga. Think about that. So you have this trend where people are saying, I'm going to take care of my body. I'm going to find out the right foods for my kids. I'm going to start understanding vitamins and herbs. This did not occur, Jasmine, 10 years ago. And so therefore, Big Pharma sees their entire business model tanking. And if you want, we can do a whole analysis and you can bring all the economists in the world and we will show you the data that their business model is tanking. It's burning to the ground, literally. So they need a new business model. And that business model is vaccines. Why? Or cell therapies. They're called biologics. They don't need to go through the same stringent testing. And they avoid all the litigation. That is what pharma is looking at. Their drugs are failing. They do not work. More and more people want healthy lifestyles. They need to mandate vaccines. That's what this is about. And you have to understand that this is no longer about nations anymore. There are forces which go beyond nations. It's called the global elite. And do they exist? Of course they do. They don't invest in America. They're not nationalists anymore in Russia. They invest broadly across they cross national boundaries. And that's what we're seeing. Those national boundaries today involve foundations like the Gates Foundation, like the Clinton Global Initiative, like the Chan Zuckerberg Foundation. These people, they're basically their own governments. Because what have they done? They take billions of dollars out of tax revenue they should have given, put it into their foundations, and that foundations are used to dictate public policy. Did you elect Bill Gates? I didn't elect him. Did you elect Mark Zuckerberg? I didn't elect him. Did you elect the Clintons? We didn't. But they are fueling public policy, top down. Public policy that you and I never decided. Public policy like the Sustainable Development Goals 3 that was passed in 2015, which says they're going to have this utopia. And in order to achieve that utopia, you should go read the IA 2030 report, which says that in order to achieve this fictitious utopia, that the goal is everyone must be vaccinated. And you know who supported that? The the International Federation of Pharmaceutical Manufacturers, IFPMA. The executive owners of that are Roche. The executive heads of that, Eli Lilly and Shinogi.
So does that mean a corona vaccine would be just the beginning?
Exactly. You nailed it. It's the beginning of a whole new model of conducting medicine, top-down medicine. Think about that. What's going to happen September of next year? And they're preparing for it. Jasmine, you know what? You can't go outside. You got to get your test. I got to give you the corona vaccine. You know what? Your neighbors, who they fear-mongered, will also call the cops on you. That's already starting to happen here, where people are saying, hey, this is fascism. We know what happened in Germany. This is not that long ago, 1940s. This is called fascism 2020. That's what it is. You have neighbors calling people on neighbors, all based on a fiction, a fictitious concept of the immune system, all false. Do you think we would have survived this long, 7.2 billion people? We're a walking factory of germs. The germ theory, since its inception, since Louis Pasteur and Robert Koch, has always been the trajectory of always blaming some germ. Blaming a germ and a virus is a very powerful way to confuse and fearmonger masses of people.
So maybe for our German viewership who is seeing terribly disturbing videos and pictures from New York, high infection rates and more people dying than in the rest of the world, what is your take on that and why are you not concerned?
I am deeply concerned. I've been involved in the health industry for 40 years. I'm concerned about the entire immune system being compromised. I'm the guy who wrote 5-6 research papers exposing Monsanto. Glyphosate destroys the immune system, gut bacteria. Where's the public uproar on that? Nothing. I've been the fighter on the front lines for nearly 20, 30 years for health. But there has been no concern about when companies like Monsanto destroy the soil, destroy biodiversity, which affects our gut microbiome. Where is the public outcry of the fact that only a few people can afford organic foods, that there's pesticides everywhere? Where's the public outcry? I'm the guy who's been talking about that for 20 years. So you want to start talking about a coronavirus suddenly and you're so scared? It's all bullshit. Because your fear-mongering doesn't match the history of all the other diseases that take place by big agriculture and big pharma. So if people want to be honest, let's talk about the epidemic, true epidemic of what's going on throughout the world. India is going to have 300 million diabetics. Do you know that? 300 million diabetics because they're moving away from their traditional diets. They're going to be eating Domino's pizza and sugar and sugar and sugar. 300 million diabetics. Who does that create business for? Cardiologists, Lipitor, etc.
But can we talk about the current situation in New York, because this is what people are watching on news channels.
How many of those people are immunocompromised?
I figure a lot. I know that a lot of Americans are very ill.
No. Do you know what the numbers are?
No, I don't know the numbers.
Well, let's talk about that. But before we start saying, do you know how many people are getting? This is just nonsense. Let's actually do science. Because science is not about theories. It's about how much in the context of the big picture. Mathematics does matter, even though America is educating students that everyone gets a trophy even if you get the wrong answer. That's the nonsense that's taking place. Math does matter. I used to spend a lot of time till 2, 3 a.m. doing math problems. I'm a very good mathematician, still to this day. Math does matter. You know what the math shows? We don't know what the numerator and the denominator is. We don't know what the numerator and the denominator is. Anyone who's coming in, the WHO has created 2 codes for COVID. This is the World Health. One is positively identified for COVID-19. And how are they doing that? They're doing a DNA polymerase chain reaction. If you go look at Kary Mullis, who's one of the discoverers of that, who won the Nobel Prize, he says those tests can be so off. And he recently passed away. Look him up, Kary Mullis. The PCR exam tries to hunt for a little piece of nucleotides, amplifies it. Do you know every one of us probably has a coronavirus of some form? Every one of us. So we don't really know what the numerator is. Second, they created another code, which was like anything sort of sounds like COVID, put it under COVID. Hospital administrators are being incentivized to put things under COVID for money and ventilators. And you can look at the numbers. The number of pneumonia, we're still in the flu season, as you know. The number of pneumonia patients, interesting enough, is coming down, almost linearly equivalent to how many people are going up in COVID. You say, so we don't know the numerator, we don't know the denominator. We do know that there's incentives for hospital administrators to brand people as COVID-19 and the secondary code. However, how many people died of the flu as of today, last year, and this year? And you'll find out the numbers are pretty much the same.
So maybe for the last question, in Germany, the officials will decide this week whether or not to reopen schools and stores and so on and so forth. The initial regulation, just for your information, was imposed until April 19th, so it should end next Monday. Other European countries are exiting their lockdown mode, Denmark, Spain, Norway. So what are your thoughts on ending these strict corona regulations, although we do not know yet if German officials are truly going to go into an exit strategy?
Well, look, I think all these governments, in fairness to the people of the world, they should release all the actual data. I want to see the actual data. I want to see every COVID patient's data and all their pre-existing conditions. Look, we just had a very close friend, a guy who has been 40-year smoker. He's an older gentleman. Whenever he gets pneumonia, he's been intubated. This is before this. Well, he just went in and he had COVID, okay, with the PCR test. Well, if something happens to him and he passes away, what are they going to brand him as? COVID. His entire history of horrible smoking, horrible eating, being overweight will be forgotten. This is one of the biggest scams that's taking place. So I would put on the table, let them send me their data. Let them put up the data on the cloud. We as a public, the working people all over the world who've been suffering from this deserve to see all the actual data. I mean, I want to see a little Excel spreadsheet, person A, their rating, which was the 2 codes, and all of their pre-existing conditions. And I will put money on it. A, they won't release that data. And B, that when you look at it, it'll be 90% plus at pre-existing conditions. And they were on death's row anyway.
Well, this is what happened in Italy. So we know this about Italy. We have a, I hope this is the right word for it, pathologist in Hamburg.
You don't want to end up in an Italian hospital. A lot of my friends, You don't want to end up in an Italian hospital, okay? They're horrible. It's a death sentence to go there. So if you're 38% or greater than 60 and you go there, you're basically screwing yourself. Now, I want to also point out, because this is sort of a public service announcement, there's been no discussion of giving people IV vitamin C, particularly those critically care people, when there's been hundreds and hundreds of papers written. It has been a therapy in the ICU. Why aren't we seeing that? Why aren't we seeing any medical official talk about high dose IV vitamin C to address this? These are the things that are really, really criminal that's taking place, because they want to replace the V in vitamin with vaccines or the V in vitamin with ventilators. Those latter two make big money. And 90% of the people who go on ventilators are going to die. It's a death sentence. So we need to start asking some other questions, not the questions, Jasmine, that they want us to talk. Well, do you believe coronavirus? No. This is all bullshit questions. Excuse my language, okay? Because I'm so annoyed as a scientist who looks at it, who spent his whole time on the math and the science and the physics, the level of complete disgraceful, fraudulent activity that's taking place. And it's being done by an elite to destroy the world's economy, because they want to, in 1 year from now, they want all of us to have mandated vaccines, either a chip or someone, and this is Bill Gates' big goal. That's what he wants. It's time for people to wake up and start asking the right questions. One question is, what is the immune system? Two, is the immune system so weak? And let's look at the actual numbers. And what will reveal to it, if we care about public health, it's a compromising of the immune system that's been taking place for years and years and decades with dirty air, dirty water, dirty food. Just look at what's going on 6 months ago. Let's open our eyes. Let's get out of the world of social media. We had protests in Hong Kong, millions on the street, tens of thousands in Wuhan fighting pollution protests. Venezuela, 2 populist presidents got elected, leaders, Modi in India and Donald Trump here. This doesn't match, this doesn't resonate with those in power when people start rising up. What's happened? No more protests in Hong Kong, no more protests in France. And by the way, Italy was one of the centers of the medical freedom anti-vaccine movement. Go look at it. All of that is gone off the front pages. What is on the front pages is Anthony Fauci, people in fear, people quarantined. And by the way, social isolation, you want to talk about what really causes virus infection? Social isolation. Go look at the 1988 landmark study that's been done and Stephen Cole's work. When you isolate people, you destroy their immune systems. Worse, more detrimental than smoking, more detrimental than high blood pressure, more detrimental than obesity. That's what's going on. So let's really ask real questions. And it's time that journalists started asking real questions.